was a hell of a good provider. I did the right thing when I picked him out, and he turned out to be a good provider, a decent husband. I never had to chase him after blurry girlfriends and all that. He was always decent bloke, full of the highest moral codes that anyone could imagine. So thank you all very much for recognising this, because I admit I didn't always.
Okay, Diane's going to read a little story about from Tony Davis, Dad's childhood friend. Okay.
How I got wisdom but ended up inside. When I left Teachers College in Newcastle, I was ready to be appointed to my first school to go out and change the world. The Australian government, however, discovered that I had turned 18 and needed to do my NATO training. First bit of good news, I had been put in the Air Force.
Nashos.
Second bit, I was to do my training at Rathmans on the shores of Lake Macquarie. This place was affectionately called the Country Club, and I enjoyed every day of my 6-month stay. I met some good mates here who taught me how to get the best out of my training. One slightly older recruit called Antonio assisted in my education, and a Broken Hill boy, Barry, made my schooling complete. Barry, because he came from so far away, was allowed to leave a few days earlier. Before he left, he told me that if I was ever appointed to Broken Hill, to let him know and he would look after me. I assured him that, seeing my 3 choices of teaching placement had been North Coast, South Coast and Hunter Valley, I didn't think there was much chance of that. How naive I was. When my telegram arrived, I tore it open with eager anticipation. Silverton, where was that? One of my college mates, John, assured me that it was a suburb of Broken Hill and walked away uttering loud goughs. John received his appointment a couple of days later, Tibooburra.
Even worse.
When I recovered from my shock, I thought of ringing Barry Ellis. He told me that Silverton was only a short drive west of the hill and that he would meet me on Broken Hill Station.
He's one of Pop's friends.
I felt better already. I said my goodbyes to my NATO mates, went home to Newcastle, spent a day or 2 with my family and headed off to Broken Hill. I was just 19. As the train pulled into Broken Hill, there was Barry, grinning like a Cheshire cat. How glad I was to see him. I hope you booked me into a decent hotel, mate, I asked. Yeah, he replied, my place. And I laughed loudly. Barry and his family made me feel very welcome, took me on a tour of the hill, drove me to Silverton where I met the family I would board with, and generally looked after me. Coming from an inner city suburb, Cook's Hill in Newcastle, I certainly had a lot to learn about the bush. I learned one thing quickly, however, and that was how country take you into their hearts and treat you as their own.
Second page is for second daughter. Second daughter.
So now, am I pushing a button?
No, you're pointing it at me.
Okay.
I'll never forget my first sight of the village of Silverton. About 5.5 hours, a post office, 5.5 houses, that says, a post office, general store and a pub. Of course, the school was also there. My boarding place was on the side of a small hill west of the town, even more isolated. So this is the Western Plains. To my surprise, the school was bigger than I'd imagined, about 40 kids. Many of these kids came from outlying properties. The boss, an older man of about 28, taught the upper division, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th classes, and I taught the lower divisions, kindergarten, 1st and 2nd. We had a row of bookcases separating the 2 groups, which meant I could see the boss all day. He could see me too. The playground was mainly red dirt, but we had one small patch of green grass, just enough to fit my entire class. The boss, when he really grew sick of looking at me, would say, "Mate, can you take a walk out on the grass and tell him a story for a while?" I, of course, would oblige, and he would do likewise at other times. One day when I had strolled down to the post office after school to post a letter home, I met an older lady, a Mrs. Y. She lived with her family in the main part of the village and seemed very friendly. She soon struck up a conversation with me. During this time, she told me about her son Colin, who was a little older than me, drove a car, attended the dance in Broken Hill every Wednesday. That's where he met Mum. You must be a little bit lonely, she said. Why not drop in and have a yarn to my son, Colin? We live across the way from the old jail.
Line you up with Colin.
I thought about this, and the next day I did just that. Colin was a miner and a very friendly bloke, and he asked me to come to the dance with him the following Wednesday night. Of course I agreed. On the night as we approached Broken Hill, Cole explained how he'd met a few mates at a nearby hotel for a few beers before the dance. Sounds good, says I. This would suit me fine, as I enjoyed a beer, but so far had been really careful with my visits and my drinking at the Silverton Hotel. All of Colin's mates were about my age, all minors as Colin was, and all keen to have a good time. I reminded myself to take things easy, even though I would have loved to have quite a few beers, as the night was very young. I shouldn't have been concerned because these blokes had 3 or 4 and then headed off to the dance. Now I love to dance, and those days jive and rock and roll were all the go. Having had many hours of practice at college, I was pretty good at this. I had a great night, met many more friendly blokes and some very interesting young country ladies. This was a fantastic night that was to be repeated many times. Daughter number 3, Belinda.
Cole and I became good friends, and his mob mates made me feel very welcome. They taught me to hunt, fish, ride motorbikes, and chase Sheilas. Not Dad. Lies. What adventures we had. I learned how to trap rabbits, how to use a ferret. Actually, Leo's was a polecat. How to shoot and butcher feral goats, and how good they were to eat.
I agree.
How to ride a motorbike, not very well. How to find civilization when you're lost at night. Wish Dad had taught me that. And how to avoid fights, nearly. The bush ways were certainly different at times. Having won the talent quest at the pub and been presented with 2 very large bottles of sparkling burgundy, we all went trapping rabbits. We drank my prize, this beautiful wine, warm out of the tin pannikins?
Pannikins, yeah, that's the motorbike
Oh,
bags
oh, okay.
on the side of the boat. Yeah, pannikins.
With Cole's wild stuff stew. Different. I met Cole's family and had several meals at his place, all cooked by Mrs. Wythe, or the old girl, as the boys called her. Poor Nana.
The old
insulting.
girl.
The old girl.
Dad was the old bloke, and a delightful bloke he was. The other members of the family were Terry, the Kelpie Cross, who almost could talk.
Huh?
In my mind's eye, I can still see the old bloke up the back, sitting on a drum with Terry at his knee, awaiting instructions. It wasn't long before I discovered that my boarding house was not really what I thought it would be. I mentioned this to Cole, who didn't seem surprised at all. Let me think about this, mate, and I'll get back to you, he pondered. A couple of days later, over a cup of tea at his house, Cole put a proposition to me. Now, mate, he carefully explained, you could come and live here with us, in our house. There's only the 3 of us now. My brother has moved on, but there is no actual room for you to have for yourself. However, perhaps you could rent a cell in the old jail across the way. I know this. This could be your room and your office, and you could eat and tub wash at our place. I was blown away. I knew the old jail. Everyone did. It hadn't been occupied for many years, perhaps 100 years. No one lived in any part of the building. Some of the stories I had heard about it would curl your hair. How many ghosts wandered around this place at night? Come on, Cole, I replied. Have you been over there and inside one of those cells? No, but I knew a bloke who is the keeper of the keys. So before you go off your head, mate, let's get the keys and have a look. My dad was a real estate agent. an inspection.
There you go.
We did just that. The back cell was surprisingly large. It had windows and even a fireplace. The walls were made from stone, great for the summer, and the timber floor was in really good order. When I pointed out to Cole that some of the panes of glass were cracked or broken, he said with a laugh, "They're easy fix, mate. Bush blokes can do anything." On what I've seen so far, I didn't need much convincing, so I agreed. Cole's family had already discussed this and thought it was a good idea. There was no trouble with electricity connection because there was no power in Silverton.
Oh, it wouldn't have suited me. No power.
Anyway. Kera lamps and fridges would continue to be the way to go. I saw my boss and he suggested I make it official, so I did the necessary paperwork and became the proud renter of the back cell of the Silverton jail for 5 shillings 50 cents a week.
Oh, week.
With Cole leading the charge. With the White family and several parents, I found all the furniture I wanted. I cleaned the walls and painted them. I cleaned the floor and revarnished it. As I fancied myself as an artist, it wasn't long before I painted a rock band, life size. Oh, yeah, posters on one wall and above the fireplace. A very large purple People Eater, a popular song of that era.
It's coming back.
The boys found me a horse skull and mounted it above the door with a nameplate. Fernando's Hideaway. Another popular song.
It's a restaurant.
Do you remember the song, Mum? Fernando's Hideaway.
Yeah, it's a rock and roll dancing song.
To me, the place looked great. Our first party was a real event. We had a 9-gallon keg, 4 or 5 loaves of bread, a pile of saveloys and sauce, and a roaring fire outside. The principal, who could see the fire, came down to see if I was okay. What a nice bloke. I lived there for the rest of the year and all the following year. It was a really happy chapter in my life, even though I was in jail. After 2 years, I was appointed to Dareton on the Murray between Wentworth and Mildura. When I arrived for my first day at this bigger school of 10 teachers, I stood in the vestibule signing the attendance book. Unknown to me, another young staff member, female, was standing behind me. As I turned, I think this might be Elaine, as I turned, our eyes met. "G'day," I said.
Diane's turn. Or is it the end finished?
"G'day," I said.
Yes, at the end.
Another exciting chapter began.
So I'm guessing that's his missus he's met.
Yeah, as Gough Whitlam would say, it was like winning the lottery, but I didn't get the money. But that's another story.
He found love.
Yeah.
I turned off.
Yeah.